Hi, this is Debbie Davis for Outlier Legal. We're here today to talk about documents, all about documents and the paper chase, and just how and what you need if you're applying for immigration or you also need vital record documents for something else. And we have the experts here to give you the information all about that. I'd like to make some introductions. First, I'm going to introduce Alfredo Abrego. Many of you have already seen Alfredo a couple of times. He's starting to be a regular on the webinars. Alfredo, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. Thank you, Debbie, for the introduction, and thank you all for who have joined to this very unique webinar so that you can get all the information that you actually need for all your interest processes.
Thanks, Alfredo. And Alfredo is the lead immigration manager for Outlier Legal Services. So many of you may hear from him or email with him. And he is here today as our expert as to any legal questions that you may have that relate to documents. Okay. So I also want to then introduce two other people here who are instrumental to this webinar today on documents. Amanda Bolton is the country manager of OLS Documents. I think that what I understand from you, Amanda, is that you were born and raised in the big state of Texas.
That's true. Yeehaw.
Yeehaw.
I've lived here in Costa Rica for 10 years now.
So do you still have your cowboy boots?
No, I was never the boots wearer of the family, but my grandpa did until the day he died wear a cowboy hat, even to take out the trash. Yes.
Did he have the big 5-gallon hat?
Yes, many of them.
Oh, really? Did he? Oh, how cool. How cool. And you essentially came to Costa Rica for, I think, in college or something like that, and fell in love with the country and then fell in love with a Costa Rican as well.
It's true. I was studying Spanish here and met a young man, and I also loved the culture. I had been to several other countries, never found one that I wanted to visit again after the first time. But after coming to Costa Rica for a few weeks, I was totally smitten and wanted to be back. So I got a scholarship to come teach here afterwards. We wound up getting engaged, and we've been married for 9 years, me and my chico tico.
Yeah. Did you get married in Costa Rica or did you get married in Texas?
A bit of both. We had our small wedding ceremony here. Actually, Dawn was there. I've been friends with Dawn for many years. And the family in Texas, not everybody could make it. So we went there and had kind of a hoedown with fireworks and a bonfire. And we drove around and made sure to visit everybody in the Texas side. So a little bit of both.
That's super cool. I think that's a really fun story. And it also, for people who are expats, I think it's good for them to know that, you know, who is with Outlier, whether it's the legal side or the documents company, you know, most of us, if they're not from Costa Rica, the rest of us are people like you who came and fell in love with the country. And some of us go back home more often, and some just, you just didn't go back home other than vacations.
That's right. Yeah, we are expats helping expats, and we just happen to have in our pockets some really awesome expert locals as well. So yeah, we're quite a unique mix that I think really gives us the strength in our field.
Well, and also at the top of our lineup, I want to introduce Dawn Drummer. Dawn is the CEO and co-founder of OLS Documents, and she is the co-CEO of Outlier Legal Services. And what I think is most interesting about Dawn is what she did before she came to Costa Rica, where she drove in a car to come to Costa Rica. You were actually a U.S. federal agent?
Yeah, I worked for about almost 14 years for the U.S. federal government and in law enforcement for two different agencies, the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Interior. And I mainly worked at doing inspections at borders, which included maritime, seaports, and land borders.
That's interesting. So was it more like customs things, or was it more like with the environmental?
It was environmental. USDA was, I was a food cop, and then when I worked over for the Department of Interior, I was an animal cop. So and not necessarily people, but obviously people were the ones that were dragging those things across the border. But I was on the lookout for those things.
for the animals that weren't supposed to be coming?
Correct.
And food and things like that. That's so interesting. Such a diverse job. And then you met Rafa.
Yeah, I met Rafa in New York when he finished up his master's degree, and we were both looking for opportunities outside of our current employment. And it was he was like, "Hey, let's go to Costa Rica." And at that time, I was ready, and I just quit my job, sold my house, and we packed up the car. And yes, we did drive all the way to Costa Rica.
Yeah, we talked about that last week for those of you that might have been at the webinar last week. And I guess he made 2 trips, one to see if it was okay, and then they went back and got you. That's love.
It was an adventure. He came down the first time on the Pacific side, and then I drove down from New York to Miami, picked him up in Miami, and then we came across through the Gulf side.
Quite a trip. Many people ask many questions about doing that. I think it would be super neat to do, but I don't know that I've got that in me. But I would love to do that. And people are ask questions, and people buy RVs, every day and just get in them and drive them to Costa Rica. There's the internet's full of the stories of people doing that. It's super cool. So tell everybody a little bit about the documents company. That wasn't right away, right? When you guys started, you really had the legal company first, and then OLS Documents was born. How'd that come about?
It was actually pretty interesting because, as we were starting our business, as Rafa and I, like working side by side and trying to figure things out, we noticed that their clients were having a hard time obtaining their documents from overseas, particularly from the US. So we started with US businesses. And because I work for the federal government, I was very familiar with international documents and how they needed to be processed. So we started kind of looking around and figuring out how we could get these things done. And we've been doing this for about 8 years now. I would say, pretty much 8 years. And we, started with our contractors, and then we've expanded. The documents business is it's a volatile business, so that's why you don't necessarily see a lot of people in it, only because things change very, very quickly. Whether it is political, whether it is COVID related, outside of the political realm, whether it is just new industry standards coming into play as well. And even the modernity of getting documents is now rapidly changing. So, it's hard to keep on top of things. And I think our team that we have right now is, as Amanda said, they're very well versed in a lot of the changes, and we try to stay on top of things. But we did it out of the desire for people to get documents in a rapid manner, as rapidly as we can get them, and seeing the necessity, particularly for people that needed the documents for residency, because again, they don't really want to go all the way back to their home country, and obtain these documents, which can even that is just as time consuming, to get these things done. So, we've been able to streamline the process and work with contractors and get a lot of strongholds in areas around not only just North America, but outside of, the Americas and in Europe and in South America as well. We hope to continue expanding into Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia, but it's a process. They're harder countries to kind of, crack the nut and get into and get the nuances figured out. But we have successfully gotten documents from pretty interesting places.
Yeah, you guys do a great job. People are so thankful to have a place to go. And having a separate company like OLS Docs is really the perfect solution for folks, because it is expensive and it's confusing and time consuming, right, to get these documents. And I think what we're mostly talking about here, for people who may not know, are things that are essentially vital records in their home country. Is that right?
Correct. We were talking about like background checks, marriage certificates, and birth records.
Okay. And you're doing that for Costa Rica and Panama.
Yes.
For immigration purposes. And then are you getting documents for people in any other countries for any other types of things?
Actually, we're definitely seeing a strong uptick in people from South America asking for our services for residency in other countries. You know, particularly maybe like Portugal, they need documents to go over there, or they need other things. Because remember, each country has a different set of residency requirements and document requirements for them. So you have to be very careful about why or what you want this document for. And that's why we have Alfredo here to help us out, because in OLS documents, we don't have quote unquote an attorney on staff, but we work side by side with Outlier Legal to help us with understanding, you know, the legality of the document in and of itself. We can get the document, but it is up to the attorneys to make sure that that document fits the requirements for the purpose that it's needed for.
For what it's needed for. And you guys have an office in Escazú, and then you also have an office in Florida as well, correct?
Yes, we have our offices in Orlando, in downtown Orlando. They are kind of like a way station for a lot of the shipments that go back and forth between the Americas, you know, North America and us in Central America. And also they do domestic services. So we have just opened up our domestic Florida background check services there in Orlando. So it is it's Florida Pacific. It's very for domestic purposes only. It's not for international, though we do have the capabilities of doing international FBIs there as well. And maybe, you know, we see in the future, you know, reaching out to local law firms in the Orlando, Florida area for providing documents from South America to the United States for residency purposes. So we hope to keep expanding outward.
Right. I would think that with that, there's going to be some particular states in the U.S. that are going to have attorneys that are going to need that, who have
Definitely.
a lot of people from those type of places moving in and that. And so what you're saying is like if someone has a company in Florida and they are looking for someone that's just not, you know, I guess a fingerprint mill, I'm going to call it that. That's what I'm calling it. You know, like some of these places, it's all online and there's no people and there's no personal interaction with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I would think a company would really like to partner with you guys in Florida to be able to do the background checks. And so they could do that, right?
Absolutely. And we have the ability to be mobile as well. So like our systems, if you're in the greater Orlando area and you have like say over 5 employees that need background checks for the Florida, you know, purposes, then you know, we can come to you and we can do them. So yeah, we have we try to be very, you know, proactive and very forward with our clients and let them know exactly what we're doing and how the process is being done. We're automating a lot of things through our platforms right now, so it's very, you know, it's very independent, but we also put a very personal touch to it.
Right. Well, I think that's one thing that sets you apart from the other companies that I was talking about. Is that it's a personal service. It's not just, you know, how many fingerprints can we do or how many background checks can we do? You know, you really care about your clients, and that's what sets Outlier apart with the legal company, and also I think the documents company as well. You talked about these documents a little bit. I think it's, you know, it's a lot more than just getting a copy of a document. They also have to be authenticated. Could you talk about that just a little bit? Like, you know, there's one thing to get your birth certificate, but you can't just get your birth certificate and throw it in the mail to Costa Rica.
Correct. So, you know, it is, I always joke about this, and I'm sure my staff has heard this all the time, is that, you know, we are an analog company in the digital age. You know, we're dealing with hard copies of documents, you know, when people are just like, send me a scanned copy, you know, thinking that's all you need. You know, but currently at this time, for regulations for these types of like immigration purposes, residency purposes, you need the physical hard copy of the document, and it needs to meet the guidelines of the country that it's destined for. So when you order a document, say in the United States, which there are multiple places that you can order these documents from, they will happily get you that document pretty easy peasy. But then the problem is that document, if it's going to be used outside of the country of origin, it needs to be authenticated for use overseas. And this is where people get a little weirded out by this. Yeah. Thankfully, in the United States, it's relatively easy because we're part of the Hague Convention, so we're allowed to do the apostilling services for our documents. And that is a simplification of the legalizations which other countries outside of the Hague Convention have to do. But for U.S. purposes, it's the apostille. So then you're dealing with a couple of the things about the document itself. Is the document current? You know, do you have an up-to-date? Is the document been issued within the timelines regulated for the country of destination? So you have to take that into consideration. Is the document official? Is it a scanned copy? Is it an official stamped copy on official paper with the state letterhead on it? If it is a birth certificate, most of the background checks that we do, I would say 99% of the background checks that we do are FBI. So they go directly through the FBI and then they get authenticated through the Department of State with the apostille. So, you know, but birth certificates and marriage certificates, they need to go back to the state that they came from for that authentication. They need to go to, if it's from New York, it goes to Albany. If they're from Florida, they go to Tallahassee, and the Secretary of State from that state will authenticate that document, put the apostille on it, and then send it to us. So that's where it gets a little complicated for people that are outside of the country of origin that they're from, trying to get documents, because you know, they'll get the document, but then they have to send it all the way back for the authentication. And unfortunately, the U.S. embassies do not help any of their citizens with documents at all. You know, they have notarial services in limited amounts, which is also a very challenge for a lot of U.S. citizens. But we do, you know, they don't do any document services whatsoever. So it is reliant on particularly U.S. citizens to look for outside contractors like us to provide them with the documents that they need.
So just because I know when I learned all this, there's going to be some people listening that their eyes kind of just glazed over because it's so much.
It is.
And just when you think you understood it, you're like, apostilled and all this kind, and some people may not even understand, other than we probably may have heard of the Hague Convention, but they don't really understand. And essentially, the Hague Convention is just a treaty, right? That some countries belong to, some countries don't. And so if they've signed on, right, then it can be apostilled. If they haven't, then it has to be done another way, right?
That is correct. And I would say the biggest country that we deal with that is not part of the Hague Convention is Canada. Right. So, you know, documents coming from Canada they're very challenging to deal with, particularly for Costa Rica, because they have a very specific kind of pathway that they have to move through the system for that legalization process. And it hasn't been easy. Canada has not been very streamlined in the process. They have been dragging out things very, very long, even after kind of like the COVID thing has been pushed to the side. But Canada hasn't been able to recover. The funny thing is that for Panama purposes, Panama has rejected or has dismissed some of the processes. So we're able to get, you know, Canadian documents faster than Costa Rica can. So it really is kind of dependent on the country that you're dealing with. So it helps, you know, and we like to say that we're document problem solvers. It helps, you know, even if you are dealing with an attorney outside of, you know, Costa Rica or Panama or anybody, that you contact us directly, and we'll give you kind of like we'll give you the document aspect of it, but we'll also try to kind of parallel the attorneys and how they feel that, you know, the document is going to be used for, because again, even some of the attorneys have a hard time wrapping their head around some of the complexities of documents.
Right. And I know people from the States, just your, you know, regular citizen, they've never heard any of these terms, and they don't even have, you know, why would they? This is very, why would they? And one thing I wanted to like make a point of also, because you were talking about how that the document has to go back in the US to the state that it came from. So people could be one, let's say it's a married couple, you know, one of the husband could be born in California and the wife be born in Kentucky, and they got married in Hawaii, and all those documents have to go back to those respective states. It's not to where you're living now. It has to, so it's way more complicated than I think people think about. And if they've had kids in other states or other countries, there you go, right?
Yep.
So
and it never in each state has their own set of rules in regards to how they process those documents as well. Like Hawaii is a great example, because if you're going to order a vital record from Hawaii and you need to use that document outside of the United States, you must tell them and pay for the apostille at the same time. They will not apostille a document, even if they issue it. They will not apostille it. You have to do it all in one stretch. So it is, each state has like these little nuances that you have to deal with. And, you know, and that's where a lot of the kind of the craziness comes in on this. And, you know, like New Jersey, we just kind of broke into, because as a third party vendor, being able to do this through like a power of attorney and an affidavit, that was a state that was really challenging to try to get into. But the funny thing is now New York is not allowing electronic notarizations. So like the 5 boroughs of New York, we still can't get documents out of them because they're not allowing the electronic notarizations.
Oh.
It's very challenging to get the online notarizations at the U.S. Embassy because spaces are limited. Clients live outside of the greater metropolitan area of San Jose. They can't get to the embassy in time. So we're always looking for ways on how we can process documents in an effective manner for our clients.
We want to take just a quick second and ask the people that are in the webinar, like, what country are you thinking about applying to residency? You know, is it Panama or Costa Rica, or you think some people get both, or someplace else? It kind of gives us an idea of what question. Oh, well, we got 50. Oh, I have to publish it. Sorry. You guys can't see it. Maybe you can you see it now, the results? So lots of people are coming to Costa Rica. That's wonderful. We can't wait to have you here. So Amanda, can you tell people a little bit more? Dawn's touched on a little bit, like what documents is it that you guys are getting for people? Like what are the main top documents that people need?
Yeah, so the main requirements are usually for any adults in the family, you need some sort of criminal police check. So Dawn mentioned the FBI reports. That's the ones that we would get for any US citizens who are adults in the family. Or an RCMP, which is another type of background check. That one's from Canada. If you're coming from the UK, it's called an ACRO. So there's all these different category or types of police reports, but that category is our basic, everybody needs that, right? Any adult in the family is going to need that for any kind of residency that you're applying for. And then secondary, after we have that understood which country they're from, which country they're going to be using it for, that requires taking fingerprints in most cases and some other security measures. Then we also need to order vital records. So for everybody in the family, that would require, depending on the residency, it could require birth certificates for everybody in the family. It could require a marriage certificate if the spouse is applying alongside the other spouse. And for any previous marriages, if there were name changes, we might also require previous marriage certificates or divorce dissolutions or other justifications of the name changes that were associated with those. So our basic ones are the vital records and the background checks. But secondary to that, and depending on the process, we also help to authenticate or to apostille bank letters, CPA letters, proof of benefits, titles of properties, sorts of things like that. But those are usually a court document justifying something on your police record, sort of things like that. So those are kind of the caveats. When you get more specifically into the process, you know exactly which documents you need, but right off the bat, it's background checks and vital records.
Okay. And I guess this is going to be a simple answer, but I think that it's important for people to understand, like, why all this necessity, you know, why all of this, you know, very sophisticated need for these documents in just a certain way. Because I think sometimes people think that the attorneys on the attorney side and some of the caseworkers are asking for things that they don't really need, you know. And I think it's important for people to understand, like, just, you know, what's the paper chase about? Why are we getting all this? Why is this so necessary?
Well, depending on the process, there's a different entity. So if you're going for citizenship, we're talking about the Tribunales Supremos de Elecciones, and they have a certain expectation for the people who are going to be applying for citizenship. And so we have to meet those expectations by providing proof of that they are who they say that they are. So that's the vital records, and proof that they're not escaping from any crimes that they committed in their home country. And so a way to do that is they require an updated certificate of those. And so I remember when I was going through my process, I did not hire anybody to help me, and it was ridiculous. I mean, so many times I had to get like 3 different FBI reports issued because I didn't get it done in time. And I'm thinking, like, what? How can my birth certificate expire? Nothing has changed since I was born. It doesn't matter if it was printed in 1986 or 2006. Why? But the issue is that when we go back to using it abroad, and that agreement that Costa Rica has to have with the home country, it has to be able to be checked in their system. And so they'll often ask for things like the Secretary of State or the registrar associated with that court, somebody who they know stamps the paper and says, I promise this is the real deal. And then depending on if they're a part of the Hague agreement or not, if they are, then they say, okay, I believe that whoever you say is real, they're real. But if they're not part of the Hague Convention, like Canada, then they pretend like they've never even heard of that guy. They have no idea who that Canada is. And so then they need their people on the ground to communicate with each other. So for the example of Canada, they have to go rent a new vital record. They have to get that certified or stamped by the local municipality or the local person in charge. Then they have to tell the Costa Rican consulate, see, it's us. And since they are both in Canada, they know each other. And then we bring it all the way to the Casa Amarilla, to Costa Rica. And we say, see, your friends in the Costa Rican consulate in Canada signed the paper. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know them. And then they finally stamp it for us. So essentially, all of this is to prove who you are and pinky promise that it's for real, and to promise that you're not running away from any crimes that you haven't dealt with. And that's not to say that your record has to be squeaky clean. We see FBI records and RCMPs that do have arrests or other run-ins on them. That's something that we have to defer to often to the legal team and say, okay, what does your client need for this? Let's look at the exact crimes that are on the background check and let's see if that's enough. So depending on if it's TSE or it's immigration, they have different requirements for what crimes might count against you, what crimes might be allowed. They also have different requirements for how long your document is considered valid. So if you're going for citizenship, for example, you only have 3 months to show that you haven't committed any serious crimes and that you're not running from crimes from your home country. But in residency cases, you have 6 months. So little caveats like that kind of are why you might need to hire somebody. And why the country is asking you for that is simply because they want to make sure you're who you are, you're not stealing somebody else's identity, and you're not running away from crimes in your past.
And there's something also I was thinking about with the background checks. We're such a mobile society, right? When I was a kid, I hadn't been anywhere other than El Paso, Texas. My kids have been all over the world. And so many people have lived in other countries, that it's not their home country that they're coming to Costa Rica from. And so what's the rule about that? Because they won't have been in let's say the US, or they wouldn't have been in Canada, and they need a criminal background check. Do they need it from, like, if they've been in Saudi Arabia, do they need it from there? Like, what's the rule about that?
Great questions. And I would ask Alfredo that question.
That's an Alfredo. We'll save that one for later.
Okay. Great. I do know that for Costa Rica's part, they also run prints. So they check their database. They check
Okay.
FBI's or your RCMP database, and those also interact on an international level. So there are also checks being run locally and in your home country. But yeah, I would defer to Alfredo if we had a client who said, hey, look, I've been the last 6 years in France, and before that I lived in Saudi Arabia. And then the immigration specialist could tell us what exactly we need to provide to prove that they are good, green lighted to come in.
So I was just thinking about that while you were talking. So if someone's on this call, on the webinar, and they really want to get more in-depth information from you guys, how do you want people to contact you? Do you want them to email you and then they can just ask you these questions, or do they go on the website and just start the order, or what's the process that you would like people to do?
Absolutely. The website is a great place to start. There's a lot of information there. Like you said, sometimes people's eyes kind of glaze over when they see what we have available and the information that we provided. So if that's overwhelming or that doesn't make sense, we can always be reached at info@olsdocuments.com, and we have our team responding to inquiries daily. But we also have social media opportunities, and the website also has a chat. So they can open up the chat on the website and they can say, hey, I have a question. If nobody's currently available to contact them, that will also send us a notification and we'll communicate back to that client. And then we have an Instagram and a Facebook, as well as a LinkedIn that people can follow, and they can message us with basic inquiries, or if they want to get in touch with an individual, they can reach out that way too.
So you're findable. You're everywhere.
We're everywhere, man.
We're everywhere. You know, and the website is olsdocuments.com.
That's right. I did want to mention earlier, you guys were talking about us having an office in Escazú and in Panama and Florida, but we don't want to forget that we also have a location in Liberia. We very recently were able to expand into our own documents office. We were kind of being housed in Outlier Legal Services until about a month ago. So if you're out in Guanacaste, if you're in that area, you don't have to make a special trip to San Jose. You can reach out to our Liberia office, and we can also provide support over there.
And that's a game changer for those of us in Guanacaste, because it's a lot shorter drive.
Absolutely, yes. And as John mentioned for Orlando, we can be mobile. If there are groups of people who want to go ahead and get printed all at the same time, we can do that. Our equipment is able to be mobile.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the people on the call if they knew about this, about OLS documents, and that how, you know, I kind of think you guys operate as kind of like being wizards. Like you need these things and you find a way, one way or the other, to get them, you know, even from some parts of the world that are kind of hard to get to. So I don't know that a lot of people knew that how this worked, or that you even, and it's, look here, I'll publish this. You can see it. A lot of people didn't know. So it's good that we're doing this webinar to get you guys some out and about and let people learn and understand about this documents, because it is complicated, and it seems on the surface like, oh, it's just a sheet of paper, just 4 corners of a piece of paper. No, it is very complicated. I wanted to ask you about that. So come on, tell us what are the challenges that you face? Like what's your war story?
There are so many, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I would say that you know, every country has, even within the United States, has its challenges. You know, in dealing with, like I told you about Hawaii, you know, we've been dealing with a document from Guam, you know, even Puerto Rico has been challenging for us to try to like get, you know, the authentication processes completed. And then if you start getting into, like you had talked about, being an international family, you know, if you're working overseas or spending time, you know, long periods of time, or maybe you had a child overseas, maybe you got married overseas, you know,
Yes.
in different places. So like I said, we like to be kind of like the documents problem solver. And I would say, and the thing is that I try to, you know, like, and documents are crazy, really, particularly if you're getting into like Southeast Asian documents, you know, where they're not part of the Hague Convention and you need the legalization to follow it through. It can get very, very, very expensive. So I remember I had a client that they had gotten married in Sri Lanka. And one is that the marriage certificate was not in English. So, and it was an old marriage certificate, so it wouldn't have been valid for the residency that they needed for. But I remember just saying, we can get you married in Costa Rica.
Absolutely.
So the thing is like, and like I could have, like I could have told them it's going to cost you like, $2,500 to get this document from Sri Lanka and then get it all the way authenticated, for Costa Rica. But why don't we just get you married in Costa Rica and it'll be easy? So we really try to work with our clients to try to do the best that we can for them in this process. So, it's like, but you have to understand, like you said, sometimes you can get the sheet of paper, but sometimes you can do like it's something a little different. But I would say even we've dealt with countries that don't exist anymore, like, people born in the former Yugoslavia, people born in different areas, people that were born in basically the colonies. I mean, we've had some clients that were born in the colonies in Africa that were quote unquote considered British. So, or Belgium. So now I have to like go after Belgium or go after the UK and like knock on doors and like, are you going to honor this person? Can you authenticate this document? Can you move forward? And it's really kind of, I can really lock horns with people about this. I mean, because it's a citizen, they're responsible for their citizens and they need to help them and we need to work it out. And, but we've always been able to try to figure something out. I think particularly having the team with Outlier behind us, the attorneys with us, to be able to do the research, to help us with some of the legality of it, we've been able to be big document problem solvers when it comes to this.
That's why you really, you kind of own the footprint, right? For that. For lack of a different term, you guys are the experts. You are the ones that, you've been in the trenches, going head to head with people in all these other countries to get documents for years. And so, I think if you can't get it, it's just, you can't get it, but, I think it's interesting because there are so many people who have lived in so many places, and it's also interesting. You don't often think at all about that somebody could be born somewhere that doesn't exist anymore, right? That's just...
It has been really interesting to see some of these things go through, and this is where maybe somebody had like even like their original birth certificate from the country that no longer exists, like in like literally like crumbling in their hands, and this is where we rely on Outlier's legal team. I mean, like, because we need to go to immigration with this very delicate document. We have to tell them why this is the only document we can get because this person was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore and the records that were there were destroyed during a political upheaval. But this is what we're forthcoming. They have residency in these countries. Their background checks are clear. We can do these things. Will you allow this to move forward? So the thing is, it's not just even, there is the rules that come with being, for the residency purposes that you're pushing forward, but there is the brains of our attorneys that really push that forward, making sure that those old weird cases that we're dealing with, that they go through. And that is very challenging to do because you really have to fight for your client on this because not many people want to put the energy into it, but Outlier certainly has done that many times for their clients.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one thing that sets Outlier Legal apart from, well, many places, and in Costa Rica and maybe other places in the world, there aren't that many law firms that actually go above and beyond to advocate for their clients and provide advocacy services for things that they also aren't really getting paid for, like going head to head with immigration, and filing complaints against immigration on, for expats because the system needs to be tweaked or fixed or changed, or, the law is not really, fair or constitutional. And, Outlier does that all the time. And so I think that's really sets them apart with that. But one thing I wanted to touch on, and we talked about a little bit earlier ago, is the challenge with the name changes. People, I think it probably is more of a haunting for women because in a lot of our countries, women change their names when they get married. Could you talk about that a little bit and, why they have to do that? Because I think some people don't understand and think we're just being picky.
Right. I mean, Alfredo would give you like the more detailed view of
Right.
it,
Yeah. But I want yours. Yeah.
but basically what it is that, you know, you do have to provide your birth certificate. And if your birth certificate is different from your passport and from your married name, you need to show kind of like a chain of command on how that name changed and why it changed. So that's where you have to make sure that you have like a seamless way that to show that this person, the birth certificate that you're providing, is the exact same person with the passport and with the marriage that's moving forward. And so that is when you're dealing with legal name changes.
Right.
But you have to be really careful because we've had people that have been kind of like, I'm not going to say that it's illegal name changes, but they're more like maybe casual name changes.
Yeah.
You know, they shorten their name, or they you know, they maybe they tweak it a little bit, and then it changes on their passport, and then it changes significantly from what it looked like on their birth certificate. So if you have somebody that has kind of like, I just want to be known by this instead, you know, something else, then if you're going to do that, and particularly if it's on your passport or any of those valid IDs, you need to officially have it done with the state that you've changed it in to make sure that you're able to move forward with your residency.
Right. Well, and that's why I wanted you to talk about that from your side, because I would have to think that it happens to you guys that you have a particular set of documents that you're getting, and then you find out after you've gotten some of them that, wait a minute, this doesn't line up. We need more documents, right? Doesn't that happen, I would think?
Definitely, you know, particularly people with multiple marriages, you know, and like how are they to make sure that they're able to show the change going through. So you definitely, anytime that if we're doing a document package for somebody, you know, and then I'll say like for an Outlier client, because that's a lot of the times what we do is like the whole package. So if we get the birth certificate and then we get other things or see the passports and we notice that there are different names involved, we contact the case managers with this client to verify what other documents need to be added to this to make sure that we show the continuity of the name changes.
Well, I think it kind of boils down to maybe some of the wizardry there, just like getting married. See, I think that getting remarried or married again in Costa Rica is the greatest solution because, right, you get 2 anniversaries every year, 2 sets of presents, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But with the name change, you know, a lot of times in many states, it isn't that complicated to legally change your name. And so that's something that you were mentioning people could look into. That way it might be, it's kind of like getting remarried. It's another path for the same result that's a lot less complicated.
Correct. Yeah, and people have to understand that we just need to, it's just like we have to show how everything is connected. Things just can't be arbitrarily, names just can't be haphazardly pushed into a residency package, and they're not going to accept it because it'll definitely raise many, many red flags.
I didn't even know. I mean, I've talked to people who've done this, and they've just essentially in the States gone to the Social Security office and put a different name down, and Social Security just changed their name, and that's not their legal name. I'm like, how's that work? You know, but stranger things apparently have happened. And so, yeah, if you've changed your name, you're going to have to go through some more hoops for Costa Rica to know you are who you are. And so, Amanda, I think we've talked about it quite a bit, but just to kind of talk about just a little bit more, I mean, why do you think it's important for people to come to you to OLS documents early in their residency process? Like, what's the benefit? I mean, because some people on this call are going to be like, I can do it by myself. I'll just go get them myself.
Well, I was that type and I just thought I could just do it myself. But it really, and sometimes you can. Sometimes if you're straightforward and you're from a state that's cooperative and you've got the time but you can. So for my situation, I thought I'm going to do it myself. What happened though for me was that implied 2 separate trips flying back to Texas. So again, if you're leaving every 90 days and you still have a home address back home and you want to ship it to your mom and have her send it to the state Department of State, I mean, it can be worked, but the pain is real. It is a really stressful situation when you're already in another stressful situation, because the point about the documents is never the document, right? This is a means to a much bigger, much more important end, which might be relocating your whole family, or in my case, starting my life post college. You know, it was like these big life steps.
Right.
And so for those big things, you don't want to leave it to chance or to, I'm pretty sure I can get it done. I'll use another personal example from my family. My sister also, you know, the Bolton that she is, we were like, we're going to do it ourselves. So she's in year 4 of her process for residency. She has received multiple times requests for additional documents from her process. She actually wound up having a child that was born here in Costa Rica, and that did not make it easier. So she still does not have her DMEX. She did eventually hire OLS Documents to get the very last document that she needs. And once it's back, Alfredo and Outlier is going to be representing her and pushing that case finally through. But if you don't have 4 years to play with, if you don't like the idea of gambling with the deadlines, then it's absolutely worth the investment to hire the professionals, hire the people who know it, who do it every day, and count on us to take that stress off your plate.
Right. Well, and that's the reason that most of us come to Costa Rica, right? We're coming there, and we're not coming there to really work or be stressed out. You know, myself, I want to go to the beach.
Yeah.
Well, or the pool. I actually go to the pool more than I go to the beach, but whatever. You know, yeah. You know, we want to have fun. We want to be with friends. We want to do things. The last thing we really want is a bunch of international phone calls. You know, even though you can do it, it's not as expensive as it used to be to do that. But the last thing you want is that. And then to find out, oh, I don't have the right thing. Or then you've got immigration, you know, breathing down your neck because they want some document in 10 days and there's no way you're going to have it in 10 days. Right. So
that's right.
It's just
counting on it. The shipping cannot be understated either. Just us having our office in Florida facilitates so much and saves so much time. Because like I counted on my mom to do all this mailing back and forth, and you got to give mom time. She's not going to turn it around in 24 hours, right? So you have to, hi mom, how are you? Have you been able to send that off for me? You don't want to deal with that headache, then that's why you would want to hire it out. Yeah.
And mom's like, I've got a tea time.
And so, yeah, she helped the first daughter. The second daughter came through asking for help, and she was like, listen, I think I'm going to need you to outsource.
We're not going to, it's more tedious and it's not cheap. You know, if you haven't gotten to Costa Rica, you don't know that sending things back and forth is not inexpensive. You can use the postal service, but if you only send it by regular mail, it's going to take 3 weeks to get back to the States. That's 3, count them, weeks, 21 days minimum.
Makes it there. Yeah.
It doesn't sound all that expensive. But, you know, we were there during the election and, you know, you can't, the way our state is set up, we don't have an easy absentee process for out of the country. And they really need to work on that, lots of states. And so we had to DHL them. It was $75 for us to, well, we put them together, but for 2 of us, you know. So it's, if you're doing all these documents, I can imagine how pretty soon it would have been cheaper and less stressful and just all the way better. So Alfredo, you've been so quiet.
I am a
He's
shy
always
person,
there waiting for us to ask him the questions.
He's like, oh, I'm making my list. You can ask me these things. So I guess so I don't forget, can you answer the criminal background check question about the like you were, wherever you were born in this one country, but now you've lived in this other country and now you're going to apply for residency, and where do you need the background check from? Like, how does that, because you don't want to get it from the wrong country and have to do it all over again.
Right, sure. Okay, well, immigration has basically 2 ways to actually accept background checks. The first one will be from the country that you were born, basically. And there's a second option that in case you actually migrated to another country, and the only option is that you have to live in that country for at least 3 consecutive years and have a legal residency or a legal status in that country for those 3 years. That would be the only second option that immigration actually gives for people to present the background check from the place that they were actually born.
Okay, so let's say that the person has been in Spain, but they were just there as a tourist the whole time. That wouldn't meet the legal status requirement for the 3 years, or would it,
No.
since they were in the country legally?
That wouldn't work, basically because besides procuring this background check from these other countries where they have been all those 3 years, they will need also to file proof that they have been living in that country legally. So basically, it would be kind of a DMX here in Costa Rica, legal residency, or maybe a green card, let's say in the United States, where it actually states that the person has been living for at least 3 consecutive years there. Without this other requirement, they will not accept any other background check than the one that where you were born.
Okay. And what do you guys do when you know, I guess the document sends you, oh, we got this background check back, you know, what's going to keep people from being able to get residency on their background check?
Well, basically, the law what mentions is, depending on the record, is mostly for intentional crimes. That's what they actually look for. If you have committed any intentional crimes, there is a big possibility that you are not going to get your residency or your citizenship if you are applying for that.
Okay. Is it worth people trying to get that expunged?
Yeah, if that can be done, totally, because like that you can actually ensure a smooth process on the residency or the citizenship, or at least you cannot get your head into be worried about something else than just hearing the weight of having to apply for a residency in any other country where you're not from. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I would say it's totally worth it. If that can be done, that would get things much, much easier.
Okay. And Don was talking about these little crumpled birth certificates. So, how old can you, if somebody's got the birth certificate, is it not about the age of the birth certificate? It's more about a process you have to do because the country doesn't exist anymore. So do you have to get a letter from?
Oh yes.
How
Okay.
do you
Well,
do that?
right now or before COVID, the birth certificates validity were 6 months for immigration, 3 months for TSC, and however, there is an important thing here because those 6 months are placed to the document in case the same document doesn't mention any other time of validity, right? So that's an important point. And in case of those countries that no longer exist, that we have had a lot of them, basically what you need to prove is, well, one, you need to get a letter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Costa Rica, where it's going to say that that country no longer exists anymore. And then you need to do an affidavit with all the personal information that the birth certificate is supposed to have.
Okay. So that's good. So there is some hope for people that have these, you know, places they were born that don't exist anymore, or if they have, even if the birth certificate they have is not in the best shape, then they can still use it with the letter and the affidavit.
No, actually, if you already have a birth certificate that is actually longer than the 6 months old, immigration, due to this COVID thing, basically issue a communication stating that they were going to accept birth certificates that were longer than those 6 months if they were in good shape, they didn't have any kind of damage in it, and if the name was matching with the name of the passport. In the case of people that have had these name changes, they are actually also accepting those birth certificates. The only thing is that they need just to file those documentation to prove that they have been changing names due to marriages or any other reason they actually did.
Okay. So what do you feel is the number one reason that people get denied residency?
Well, it's a tricky question because I don't think we actually have a number one reason because we have several. At least I'm going to mention two of them. Basically, one of is well, the validity of the documentation. Most people do not actually take care of the documents and do not investigate if they are doing on their own regarding the validity that they actually need to have on the documents to actually apply for residency or for citizenship. So mostly that could be number as the number one, I could say. And the other one, talking regarding basically background checks, is the no disposition, talking regarding if you have a record, because mostly TSC and immigration will request for some additional documentation to know how your records are currently. So mostly those would be like the two main reasons that people might get trouble with either immigration or TSC.
And Dawn, I just really wanted to go back to you for a second and see if there's anything else that you wanted to add, or I hadn't asked you.
Yeah, I just wanted to do one last thing is that we had put out an announcement last about a week and a half ago, almost 8 weeks ago, about the FBI making some changes to the electronic fingerprinting, which we provide in OLS documents. It was a kind of it came really fast. We didn't have there wasn't like a lot of time to kind of collect our thoughts and get back to the FBI and provide them information. And again, this is through our contractor, not necessarily through us directly. And so the FBI had said August 1st, we're going to stop the electronic fingerprinting for fingerprints that are done abroad. And that would have switched us to go back to doing ink prints for background checks, which we can do. Our whole staff is trained on ink prints because we actually have to do ink prints for Canadian RCMPs. Right. So currently at this moment, the FBI they have let us know that they have they've gotten all of our questions, but they don't have the answers to them yet. So therefore, they have not enacted that restriction for the electronic fingerprints. So it is business as usual at this time. But it doesn't mean that the FBI is not going to come back and say that they need something changed or need something altered. We are still able to do the background checks. We are still able to move forward with the processes. Just may take a little bit longer than our normal processing times. But we're functioning as business as usual. And the information that I was able to get from the FBI when I started doing a little bit of research was not necessarily that like us or anybody then on outside of what we were doing was illegal. It was actually people within the United States, employers that were requesting FBI background checks for licensing and employment purposes. And that is not why we do background checks. So our background checks are only for residency purposes. And they're for legal purposes in the sense that we have a signed power of attorney for our clients, and then that power of attorney allows us to hand over those sensitive information to the attorney that is representing him, whether it is Outlier or an external company that we're working with. So we have been able to prove to the FBI that we have a chain of command in regards to who has access to those vital records, and we are also able to prove that we have the technology installed to protect and encrypt all of the information that we are transmitting electronically. So we feel that it's going to come back to our favor, but it's still the FBI, so you still never know what they're going to do. So I feel confident about it, but you never know.
How many years did you work for the feds? You know all about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you wouldn't mind to take another short poll and just let us know how you feel about the webinar and if you enjoyed it and learned something, because that's ultimately the goal is to spread knowledge so that people understand what they need to do, why they need to do it, and so we can help them be successful in becoming residents of Costa Rica and achieve their dream of being in Costa Rica or Panama. So I wanted to also let everyone know that on the 18th of this month, we'll be joined again by Alfredo and some people from the immigration team. We're going to talk everything about the pensionado residency. So bring all your questions, all your worries, anything that you want to know, because we're going to talk about that in detail so everyone can understand exactly what's entailed with applying for the pensionado residency. And most importantly, if you could subscribe and give us a thumbs up, we would really appreciate that, because we want to continue bringing content like this to everyone so that they understand about what's going on in Costa Rica and in Panama and how they can fulfill their dream of living in Costa Rica. Thank you so much again for joining. Pura Vida. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, team.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.